So we'll get started. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar today. I'm Rob Bergman. I'm a senior product manager here at Cox Business Cloud Computing. And today we're focusing on Microsoft Teams and how you can leverage it to really empower and engage your employees and to be more productive.
Rob, you might be on mute.
I was on mute. Apologies, everybody. Let me start over here real quick. So it's 1:30. We're going to get started. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining the webinar today. I'm Rob Bergman. I'm a senior product manager here at Cox Business Cloud Computing. And today we're focusing on Microsoft Teams and how you can all leverage it to empower and engage your workers and be more productive. Just some quick housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded. If you have any questions during the session at all, you can enter them into the Q&A chat function here, and we'll address these at the end of the session. We should have some time left over to get to most of these. We'll also be sending a recording to everyone that registered for the session, so you'll all be able to peruse this later. A little bit about Cox Business Cloud Solutions. Our services are powered by RapidScale, who was acquired in 2018. And today we really are well integrated with Cox Business. We focus heavily on wrapping value-added services around cloud products with the power of Cox behind us. Some of the products we work with today are desktop as a service, infrastructure as a service, both in private and public cloud, SD-WAN featuring VeloCloud from VMware. And today we're reviewing Microsoft Teams, which falls into our productivity and collaboration suite. As you can see here, we also have a very high Net Promoter Score in the high 70s, which far exceeds the industry average. And it really helps demonstrate how we help customers by filling critical gaps in their technology skills and help them offload some IT functions so they can use resources more strategically internally. And really, we're about enabling technology that can help workers be productive from anywhere, at any time, on any device. Microsoft Teams is actually a pretty big part of that philosophy of enabling those workers to be productive anywhere, anytime. And to help shed some more light on how Teams does this, we're going to be doing a live demo in a bit with Robert Gates from Microsoft, who's joined us to walk through the features and walk through a demonstration of Teams. There are really four core things that have to be tackled to really engage workers with a product like Teams. Number one, we need the ability to virtually bring workers and teams together to collaborate, regardless of where they're located, whether it's via phone or chat or just sharing information on a real-time basis. Secondly, we have to enable workers to use any device anywhere to collaborate. It really starts to talk about a bring your own device, a BYOD strategy, where users can leverage personal devices for work purposes and aren't limited just to work devices. Thirdly, we have to connect not just internal employees, but also external parties like customers and vendors and partners and agencies. And lastly, we have to effectively augment or replace that face-to-face meeting experience in a virtual sense that still feels personal. One of the things we hear from customers pretty frequently are questions around, where does Teams fit in the larger Microsoft ecosystem? When do I use Teams versus email versus SharePoint versus Yammer? And it's a good question because there's a lot of tools in the Microsoft 365 suite, and there is probably some perceived overlap between them. This is actually a Microsoft slide. And I recommend kind of looking at their products in this way. Microsoft basically broke out collaboration and communication into two loops. There's an inner loop, where there's people you talk to frequently and work with frequently and collaborate with. And there's an outer loop for communication that's more one way and less frequent to a wider audience. That inner loop can be contained of both internal and external people. So it can be employees and customers and partners and vendors. But the key in the inner loop is the communication and collaboration needs to happen pretty seamlessly and pretty frequently to be effective. So that can include the chat, the meetings, the phone calls, collaboration, whiteboarding. We'll get into all these during the demo, and Microsoft Teams really is the one application that really facilitates all of these. Teams also works very closely. It's integrated in the back end with SharePoint and OneDrive in the middle there. So that enables us to share documents and spreadsheets and presentations, real-time collaborative editing, all those sort of things. And then underlying it all, obviously, is Microsoft Outlook and email, which is really more targeted for specific communication between you and individuals you typically find in an email thread. So Microsoft developed developed Teams to achieve all these goals from a very single, easy to use tool. And they offer the ability for, and we'll go over all these in a moment, but schedule and ad hoc meetings via phone and web, instant messaging chat, collaboration via Teams channels, which we'll dive into in some detail. And we'll touch briefly on some automation tools that can integrate with third-party apps and really help teams be even more engaging and drive more collaboration. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Robert Gates from Microsoft here and have him walk us through the product and dive into some of these features.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Give me 1 second. Let me just open up my demo. All right, perfect. So as Rob mentioned, I am one of the Microsoft Partner Technical Architects focused in on Microsoft Teams and all of the various workloads across the Microsoft 365 stack. So what I want to talk a little bit about today is to get you to think a little bit about Teams and sort of a couple different facets. And I'm going to walk through a couple different use cases and scenarios. So there's sort of 3 kind of core components that you can really think about with Teams. One of them is really the foundational pieces. That is your instant messaging, your presence, the ability to use Teams for a calling and a meetings platform, and then the teamwork and the collaboration side. And then outside of the foundational pieces, there's this opportunity to take advantage and really help drive a return on investment of your Microsoft 365 and your Office 365 purchases to really enhance the process and the procedures and workflows that your teams are using within the organization. And that's where we can take advantage of SharePoint and OneDrive, Exchange, Yammer, all of the various workloads that are part of the platform, and really begin to enhance those and use Teams as sort of that single pane of glass to display and to get people to interact and work with that. There's also another layer of Teams where you can take Teams and sort of extend it into other line of business systems, workflows, and process to build in automation, or to take some high velocity events and triggers that are happening in other systems to bring them in and use Teams again as that single pane of glass. So let's start with some of the foundational components of Teams. So like Skype for Business and other communications and collaboration tools, we have instant messaging and presence. This is going to give you the ability to have one-to-one and one-to-many conversations with folks across your organization, as well as potentially across other organizations with a technology or feature we call federation. This will allow you to have these one-to-one and one-to-many conversations with up to 250 users in sort of this single-threaded chat conversation. You can also communicate and collaborate with folks on Skype Consumer as well through this component. Now, one of the things that's really interesting and with the sort of the chat conversation or the chat capabilities of the Teams client is that the conversations are persistent. So this dialogue will stay here for the indefinite amount of time. Now you do have the ability to put in security compliance controls and governance controls around that. So maybe you already have a retention policy and you want to limit the length of time. You can obviously do that through those policies. But inherently by default, it will maintain and keep all of those conversations. Now, you may have a dialogue with an individual over a period of time, and maybe you conversing and sharing files through that dialogue. So what you'll notice is we've got inside of a chat thread, the ability to go in and take a look at the files. And so here, any files that I might have shared with this individual, Megan, for example, would show up in this conversation thread. So it's great if you're having maybe if you've shared a file with somebody maybe a couple of months ago, you've got a long running conversation, you quickly want to find that file because you think it's of value for something else, you can quickly go through and grab that. Now, inside of there also is the ability to take advantage of applications inside of a chat. So here's an example of our organizational application that's pinned up as a tab. Just real quick, these here are tabs inside of the Teams client. So here I've got an organizational chart. So maybe I want to go do a one-to-one message with Isaiah. Isaiah is currently not available because I could see that in his present status. If I hover over his icon, it currently shows that Isaiah is offline. So maybe there's somebody else on the team that might be available. So here's a quick way using the organizational chart tool to see that folks are available, or maybe I need to reach out and grab the person's manager to escalate an issue or get some answers quickly. In addition to that, you have the opportunity to share and collaborate on applications in a one-to-one chat. So let's say you're, maybe on a weekly basis, you're having a conversation around some data, maybe an Excel sheet. You can actually pin up an Excel sheet as a tab within the particular chat conversation thread, or any one of these many applications or applications that you build, right? So if it's something that you're going to collaborate or manage on a highly frequent basis, it's a great way to bring that into this chat thread and allow you to sort of simplify and improve your workflow and your process. Now, at any point in time, if you're engaged in a one-to-one chat, you'll notice I've got the ability to escalate this to a video call, an audio call, and potentially a screen sharing session as well. So you've got the ability to really get deep into your collaboration components. Now from there, let's go into the calling section. So Teams has the ability to be a phone system. And so with that, out of the box, with all of the Microsoft Teams licensing, you will see this calling icon and the ability to, again, from a chat window, escalate to a voice and a video call out of the box. Now, what you'll see here is in this particular client, I actually have a dial pad, and you can see that I have a phone number. If I don't, I can at least do voice over IP calls between Teams clients, again, within my organization or with those outside of the organization. In this case, I've also enabled this particular demo user with the ability to make a phone call to the public telephone network number. So you'll see I've got a dial pad. I could take advantage of a large array of devices. So maybe I want a headset like I'm on today, or if I scroll down, you'll see there's different speaker devices, traditional desk phones. If you've got conference rooms, various room systems that can be deployed in the conference rooms environments, as well as the conference room phones, cameras, and a variety of other room system accessories and devices like speakers and microphones that hang up in the ceiling and in your ceiling tiles. So from a device support perspective, we've got a wide range of devices that can be part of the calling and the meetings experience, as you can see here. So let's go back. Now, like other voice systems, we've got the ability to have speed dials, contacts, call history, as well as voicemail. These voicemail messages will be stored inside of the Exchange email accounts for the individual users. There's also a transcription feature, and this would then transcribe that call for you, and you'd see it as well. Now let's move over to meetings for a few minutes. So we're currently in a live event, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. Let's talk about your standard traditional meeting. So inside of the Teams client or from the Outlook client in your email, if you're scheduling, you have the opportunity to convert or make a meeting a Teams meeting. When you enable it as a Teams meeting, it'll allow you to bring up to 250 people into a meeting where you've got two-way audio, video collaboration, as well as screen sharing. Very standard opportunity. You come in, you'll add your title for the meeting, your standard dates, times, etc., description information. You've got the ability to grab the scheduler assistant right here from the Teams client, or again, if you're doing it from Outlook, you'll go through your standard process and flow inside of Outlook to schedule that meeting, and then simply enable that as a Teams meeting. The individuals will get that meeting invite, as well as if you have the audio conferencing capabilities turned on for your users, the ability to get a dial-in number associated with that. Now, this is a standard meeting. Up to 250 people can participate. We've got the ability to have a chat thread that's happening on the side. People can converse and have dialogue, as well as have the video up and running. The current video format is up to 3x3 or 9 people in the screen. We're obviously working on enhancing that and continuing to expand that as well. So let me back up for a moment. And let's talk about live events. So I've got the ability also from the Teams client to schedule a live event. Now you're seeing this content today from a Teams live event. This is sort of the back end of how you schedule a live event. Again, very similar to scheduling a regular traditional Teams meeting, but you'd come in and you'd build out your standard live event link and details here. You would invite your producers and presenters that'll be part of the meeting. For example, I've been invited to this live event as a presenter to present my content and my demo. Now, when you come into this section, we've got some options here to configure and take a look at your live event. Is this for folks, specific subset of folks within the organization, or do we want to make this a public event and allow for others to engage and come in from the outside? Now, there's 2 ways you can produce live events. One is that you can use the Teams client as a way to produce that event. Right now, this particular live event is being driven from sort of the Teams backend. And you'll see we've got the ability to provide a recording of the video that we can send out to participants later. We can make the meeting link that you joined into this meeting today available as a recording. You can simply click that same link and then rejoin. We've got closed captionings, an attendee report, and then obviously a Q&A window where you can ask questions in real time, and the presenters can obviously respond back. Now, if you do happen to have production quality equipment, maybe a device called like a TriCaster where you can do production recordings, or some open source and software-based camera producing tools, you can actually stream straight into the Teams environment. And as you see here, we've got this external app and device support as well. So multiple ways to get the content in and produced and managed for your live events. Now, live event is a little different than a traditional meeting. You can support up to 10,000 individuals from the being able to see the stream. And again, to participate, you do need to use the Q&A window because it's not a two-way presentation. Really good for webinars and scenarios like that. And of course, at any point in time, you do see here we've got the Meet Now button. So if you quickly need to spin up a meeting, you can come right into the Teams client and escalate that to a meeting. All right, so we've gone in, we've talked a little about instant messaging and presence. We've talked about using Teams as a phone system, as well as a meeting platform. And just to sort of enhance a little bit real quick on the meetings and the calling platform, when you turn on the phone system capabilities and you've connected your Teams experience into your phone services, you've got the ability to use auto attendance and call queues and add those components as part of that architecture. So there's additional services and functionality as part of the calling system. Now let's get into one of the core components of the Teams experience. And this is where you start to think about collaboration and kind of as Rob mentioned before, the sort of that inner loop, or if you think about it, this place for high velocity conversations, a location where you can go and really better manage really frequent conversations, file sharing, collaboration that you may have with individual groups or departments or folks that are focused on maybe on a specific project. Now, one way I'd like to get started and think about Teams is I look at my email and think a little bit about the email and where some of those really noisy reply all conversations exist. Those conversations, they're high velocity, they're very difficult to manage, right? Lots of noise and potentially long threads that are in there. And it's also very hard for you to think about or identify what tasks are assigned to you, or even prioritize what's important in those threads that you should look at versus not. So a lot of times I use that as sort of an initial question to kind of define how we're going to bring that into Teams. Now, when you do that, let's take a look at the teams for a minute. So the first thing you'll notice is we've got Mark8 project team, store portal, and a couple other teams here. Now, a team is basically your peer group or the group of individuals that are going to be allowed access to the conversations and the content that are stored within this team. The team is, again, that permission or that security zone. What you'll notice inside of the team is you've got individual channels. These are conversation threads. So if you think about like a reply all email, there's typically lots of different conversations that are happening there. The channels are going to be those individual conversations. Now you'll notice I've got one channel here called finance, and it has a padlock. This is something we call private channels. And so there are only a few individuals in this particular team that I have configured to have access to the private channel. So maybe there is just a subset of the conversation around this Mark8 project where we need to keep the finance information kind of sort of limited to a smaller subset of folks. And this is a great way to do that, right? Again, through that team, and you create these private channels. So everybody that's part of the Mark8 project team can see all of the channels with the exception of the finance, and only those that are defined within the Mark8 project team can see finance. Now, when you're within a channel, similar to the chat, you'll notice that we've got a files tab, right? Very similar to the chat. All your files are going to be stored and managed within the Teams experience here. Now, something you want to know is that when you're looking at the files from the Teams experience, when you create a new team, the files themselves actually reside in SharePoint. When you create a new Microsoft team, you're creating a SharePoint site behind the scenes. And so as you'll see, if I go to the Mark8 project team, this is actually the SharePoint site behind the scenes. So if you have experience or familiarity with SharePoint, you can definitely take advantage of existing SharePoint sites and basically bolt teams on top of it. Or as you're creating the teams, it gives you the opportunity to have these teams available for users in a couple different scenarios. So let me pull up my OneDrive location for a moment. And what you'll notice is all of those teams that I'm part of show up as shared libraries. Or if you think about it in your traditional file services, these are my mapped drives. So all of those teams that I'm collaborating and working with my peers, I have access to all of those conversations in addition to all of the files in one convenient location. Now, one of the advantages of using SharePoint and the OneDrive components is that you get a lot of extra capabilities above and beyond what you could do in a traditional file server. So we have version control. We have protection against things like CryptoLocker and a lot of those virus and malicious attacks, because you can roll back data to a known point in time that's good, again, using that version control. There's also, because we're using SharePoint, the ability to have real-time collaboration. So let me just go back into my Market project team. Let's go to the go-to-marketing plan channel. And let's take a look here. So you'll see I've got, in this case, Megan posted a product brochure PowerPoint file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up this PowerPoint file. Now you notice I'm opening it within the Teams client. I could have chosen to open it inside of PowerPoint locally on my desktop, or PowerPoint through the browser. And you can see I've got the ability to manage and work with this document. Now you can come into PowerPoint, maybe from your local desktop computer, join in on this file right here, and we can actually work in real time and collaborate. So lots of ways to sort of work together, as well as manage the files, version controls, et cetera, right from the Teams experience. Now, as I mentioned in the chat, again, you'll notice this bar or these tabs that are available up here. So if I click on posts, again, this is going to be the conversation threads that are happening. And the one thing that's a little different than chat is you'll notice that the conversations are sort of grouped together as conversation threads. So here Isaiah posted a message about reviewing some information for a contract review. And then you can see here that I've, in this case, Megan, as my demo user, has added a tab with this product brochure, et cetera. And so I could either start a new conversation by going all the way to the bottom of the Teams client, adding a new conversation thread, or simply replying and keeping those conversations isolated to those conversation threads. So as you can see, when you think about even taking that email example, we've got these noisy reply alls. You suddenly can work a little bit better. You can see and be more efficient, because when you look at the conversation threads, you've got the ability to break them down by the various conversations, as well as conversation topics that are happening inside of that thread. Again, the ability to see the files using the files button. And then you've got the ability to pin up, again, applications or even share documents. So here's an example of a product brochure that I've pinned up. This could be something that we're going and working with, on a frequent basis. Now, if you look over to the right, you'll also notice that we have the ability to have conversations specifically around this particular tab. So I can click on this conversation thread. And as you can see now, I have a conversation window specifically around that. So here's an opportunity if you're having dialogue and you're working and collaborating on a shared document, how do you sort of contain or isolate that conversation to specifically that document? And so here you can use that conversation thread. And then again, more examples. Now I mentioned when I started presenting, I was going to talk about three sort of layers. One is sort of the foundational pieces. Then there's this enablement of the core Microsoft 365, Office 365 components, and then there's the developer side. Now, what you're noticing as I'm clicking on the tabs is we're starting to see other things from the Office 365 stack. In this case, I've got a shared Excel sheet. I'll click on the GTM plan. We're going to pull up the Microsoft Planner application, and you'll be able to see a planner board. Sorry, this is a presentation. Where did I go? Here it is, the Market project plan. And so as you can see, we're pulling up different Office 365 related applications and exposing those into the various teams and the channels. Now, when you look at the layer here, this is really more designed to be a team. So you'll see this is the project plan for the go-to-market team around these specific topics. You'll also notice I have here in this left rail applications that are personal, or what we call personal scope applications. These are applications that are going to be specific to me and show my data. So not only do we have the planner application sort of designed and showing team-related data, but I can come over and just look at my personal tasks that maybe are defined inside of the planner application. And so you'll see I click on the planner board, and now these are tasks that have been assigned to me or that I've created in my own personal view, as opposed to sort of that team scope, right? Again, being able to look at those components really holistically from not just my tasks, as well as tasks for the rest of the group. So you can kind of work together in those two different scenarios. But as you start to see, we're able to expose more and more of the Office 365 capabilities, whether it's Planner, Power BI, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, right? You think of the workload in M365, you can expose it here. where we're basically making Teams kind of that portal or that dashboard, right? That single pane of glass where you can sort of work and collaborate on a day-to-day basis. And in different situations, it really makes sense when you look at the teams and the channel architecture to really bring those in to really drive that collaboration and create that community. When you think about also putting documents inside of teams and channels, there's some benefits because you get this opportunity to work out in sort of what we call working out in the open, where you can collaborate and really get deep into various process and workflows. So here again, I have this product brochure, others can join in, we can collaborate in real time. Or if you think about typical workflow, maybe you're working on a PowerPoint presentation, at the end of the day, you email it to a bunch of folks and say, hey, can you take a look and give me some feedback on the document? Well, instead of doing that, work on it inside of a team and a channel. People's natural curiosity will kick in and they'll actually go in and potentially look at the data, the things that you're working on, and give you some feedback automatically. So it's an interesting way to sort of manage those conversations. There's also a lot of other little features inside of the various teams and the channels. So let's go to Digital Assets tab for a channel for a minute. And hold on. Here's Design tab. Yeah, which tab I had. Oh, there it is. So here in this case, you'll see that I've got Lee in the Design tab conversing in Chinese. Now, I don't speak Chinese, but within the Teams client, we do have the ability to translate that information. So here within one click, I can now translate, and Lee was asking me if I could share the latest status report. So lots of little features right across the board inside of the Teams experience to really enhance that functionality, especially when you're dealing with folks maybe that are speaking different languages. All right, let's pull up. So again, here's a shared Word document as well, right? The ability again to collaborate and to manage those documents right from the Teams experience. Now, a couple things to sort of highlight. And when I went back to my email example, you think about process and workflow, and email can be a very noisy environment. And you're starting to see here in my demo environment, I have quite a few teams and channels. So how do you prioritize? How do you identify what's really important to you versus not? So there's a couple of ways we kind of think about that. One is you have the ability to hide channels that maybe are not important. So for example, go to market. I'm not part of the marketing team. Maybe I don't need to monitor or keep an eye out on that marketing conversation. So in this case, I can hide that particular channel. So it's not something that's really in my way. I also have the ability to control notifications inside of channels. So if I go to channel notifications, you'll see I've got the ability to turn off and on the notifications. In this case, maybe digital assets, I don't really get involved in the graphical side of the project. So I'm going to turn off the notifications so I'm not bombarded or hit with a lot of alerts and stuff. Maybe because research and development is my core job. So I will come into research and development and I'll turn up the notifications there, because anything that's happening in research and development, I really want to be proactively notified. So as you'll see in this case, I've turned on notifications for that particular channel. So as dialogue happens, as people are adding new files, engaging in dialogue and conversations, I will be proactively notified from the toast messages, the little pop-ups that happen on the top bottom right, to information being posted in my activity feed. So it allows me to stay connected and be more responsive to certain channels that are really important to my day job versus others that are nice to have, but I don't really need to be bombarded with alerts about those conversations. Now, there may be situations where somebody in, let's say, the digital assets team needs to alert me or draw my attention. So we do support things like @mention. So in this case, if I come down, as you see, I can start typing in a user and grab their attention. So I can go in and @mention in a specific individual. I can also @mention the channel. So anybody that is part of the team, I can @mention the particular channel, so they're specifically notified. So anybody in the digital assets web channel, boom, will be notified from that conversation. You can also @mention the team. So as you see, I've got the @Market project team as well. So different options. We also have this tag architecture where you can assign tags to specific individuals, maybe 3 or 4 people in the finance department, are spread out across this team and these channels. I can tag those individuals and then just send an at mention to the tag itself. So lots of ways to be very prescriptive in how you're sending out notifications and alerts. There's this activity feed, kind of similar to your social media activity feeds, where all of the events and triggers that are happening throughout the day that you might have been at mentioned or are relevant to the channels and the teams that you're monitoring will show up here, and it'll give you the ability to quickly sort of scroll through all of the various events. Now, in addition to obviously the first party applications within the Teams experience, you do have the ability, again, to bring in other applications, other processes, other systems. So think of help desk platforms, other line of business platforms, where, again, there's that high velocity conversation, collaboration going on, and you really want to pull that information into Teams, either as a one-to-one chat. You can use bots. You can use the tabbed architecture here as a way to sort of expose that. And I apologize, my demo client is frozen up here. Let me just refresh that. And so you've got the ability to, again, to bring in applications. So as you're using the foundational pieces, there's opportunities to expose and, share files and collaborate. And then as you think about other business process and workflows, whether it's automating a particular process where we've got the Power Automate and the Power Apps platform, or connecting into other line of business systems where you've got data that you can pull in and aggregate together, that all can come into the Teams experience. And again, either as a chat, one-to-one conversation, or as something that's going to happen in one of these teams and channels, and your ability to sort of pull that data straight in. And so again, it could be a notification or an alert, or maybe you've got an inventory system, for example, and there's a scenario where you need to manage those alerts. You've got the opportunity to bring them in. Maybe there's a group of retail or inventory managers that need to monitor those alerts. So a great place to do that would be inside of a specific team and a channel. All right. Also, when you're doing your transition, each one of these channels, you do have the ability to have an email address. So if you start to have some dialogue or things are happening in email that you'd like to forward into a team, you can go do that right to the individual team's email address, as well as there's an integration now between Outlook and the Teams client, so you can send stuff back and forth between the two. And a couple other real quick things I wanted to show. Again, all of these applications down here in this left rail are what's called personal scope. So if I wanted to see my OneNote, maybe my stream account, maybe videos that I've uploaded inside of the stream environment. If I've got Yammer set up in my organization, the ability to see the Yammer and the communities that I'm part of. And then you get into things like what we call the shifts application. And this is where you've got an opportunity to take advantage or help teams that are maybe what we classify as the first line workers, those that are maybe on shift or hourly work, or they're working on the floor. They're not sort of an information worker sitting at the desk. And here you've got the ability to use the Teams client, again, to communicate, to collaborate, but also allow them to build departments and teams where they can trade hour and work schedules. We also have integrations with some of the payroll platforms like ADP as an example, where you can actually feed these schedules right into those platforms for payroll purposes. And again, from that sort of final phase, how can we integrate Teams into business process, business workflow? Here's this opportunity where you can take advantage of a ton of third-party products and softwares that are available that you can bolt into the Teams experience, connect those into those other line of business systems. And we have a whole entire development framework. We have the opportunity to write applications and integrations and bring those again to use and put inside of a Teams experience as that single pane of glass. So Teams can be the phone system, could be your meetings platform, as well as a place to collaborate, share files, work on documents. And again, all of this can be done from the Teams client in a couple different scenarios. So you could be on a desktop, a tablet-based device, or a mobile device. And depending on what you're doing and how you need to work, you've got access to all of your data, your content, your conversations, as well as using that as potentially a phone system to communicate and collaborate. And the Teams client itself on your mobile can also be a secondary device. Like when you're in the middle of a meeting and you need to maybe converse, like for example, I'm presenting in this live event right now, but if I needed to see the chat conversation that was happening, I could do that from my mobile as sort of a companion device. So lots of ways to integrate devices into the Teams experience, as well as business process flows and applications. So that's kind of the core things that I wanted to show today. And I think, let me just go back. Yeah, I hit it all. So I will pass it back to Rob. Thank you.
Thank you much, Robert. Appreciate it. So real quick before we get to the Q&A, just a couple more slides. I wanted to quickly talk about how you can get Teams. There's basically two different versions. There's a free version that's pretty limited. It's a web-based only app. And then there's the full paid version, which is what we saw today in the demo. The good news is it's very, very easy to get the full paid version of Teams. So the full version of Teams is included in every seat of email-enabled Office 365 Enterprise or Microsoft 365 Business that you purchase. So it's not included in Exchange Online Plan 1 and Plan 2, but the good news there is it's a very seamless upgrade to one of the plans listed here, so you can start leveraging Teams immediately. When you purchase these through Cox Business Cloud Solutions, you'll get some extras in addition to the Office software and Teams. We actually include direct 24/7 support for both IT admins and end users, so that can help alleviate that support labor workload from your internal IT folks. We also include guided email migration and onboarding, ongoing consultative configuration management. So you basically tell us what outcome you want from Office 365, and we handle all the enablement and the configuration for you. And then online user adoption training. If you think back for a moment to what Robert walked us through today with Teams, it's probably new for a lot of you, and it's certainly new for your users. Our online user adoption training that we actually include with each seat of Office 365 and Microsoft 365 can actually help get users very acclimated to Teams very quickly and help them start to adopt and use their product much more effectively. So with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A and see if there's any questions. Summer?
Yes, there are quite a few questions, so we won't be able to get to them all live today, you guys, but we will be getting the Q&A report after and can follow up with you. So let's get started with this one. Does Cox have consulting resources that are knowledgeable of Microsoft 365 and Teams, or do we need to leverage Microsoft consultants?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We absolutely have people on staff. We don't leverage any third parties, including Microsoft, for our service delivery. So if you call up and you have a problem, or you want to make a configuration request and you want some assistance with that, or you're working with us through an email migration or a guided onboarding, you're talking directly to Cox Business resources. And they're all US based, they're all Microsoft certified, and they're all direct problem solvers.
Awesome. The next one is, how does Teams compare to products like WebEx, GoToMeeting, and Zoom?
So I'll take a shot at this, and I'm curious what Robert's perspective is. What I hear from customers most often in terms of why they were interested in Teams, it's a single tool that's included with their Microsoft 365 investment that provides the chat, the meeting, the user calling, the channel collaboration feature. So they don't have to make an additional investment and manage a different tool from a different vendor. It's all integrated with Azure AD, so you can secure that with Azure AD, and you can also add external users via AD Federation. As you saw in the demo, it's very highly integrated with OneDrive and SharePoint, and it's got some extra capabilities there like version control and the real-time editing. The other thing I mentioned is, and we saw this firsthand, with the stay-at-home orders that came out with COVID, there was a 500% increase in Teams meetings on the back-end infrastructure over a 19-day period, which is tremendous growth. And Microsoft scalable infrastructure, all based on Azure, was able to hand that all seamlessly without any degradation in performance or availability. So we've been pretty happy with it. Robert, any perspective on that?
I mean, I think you hit on the core pieces in that when you think of Teams, it's an entire platform. It's not just a meeting solution. It's not just a collaboration solution, but an entire, if anything, productivity toolkit, right? So the ability to share files and collaborate and do meetings and calling and screen share. And I mean, I've been using Teams since day one when it first came out, obviously within Microsoft. And it has transformed the way I work and operate, and the way I work and operate with the groups. And my particular group is remote, and we've been remote since day one as well. And our ability to stay connected and collaborate, we're very big on keeping video up. And it's in the ability to have the real time and the near real time conversations. And then just that pure integration across the board, whether it's, as you saw, I was trying to hit on these different little pieces, but the ability to bring in a planner, application into Teams to collaborate from a teamwork perspective, but also to see my individual, or you name the particular workload inside of Office 365, and your ability to bring that and integrate that in. As a matter of fact, the capability of Teams, which is leveraging a lot of those capabilities, like you said, SharePoint and OneDrive, when Teams sits on top of those resources, and that's where those files are stored. So I look at it as, Teams is really an entire ecosystem or a platform to sort of the productivity cloud, which would be the O365 and the M365 stack.
Great.
All righty. Can you use Outlook distribution lists to invite people to a live meeting?
Yeah, go ahead, Robert, sorry.
So a distribution list today to a live or to a meeting is there, as well as there's some additional enhancements to improve that with that's coming in the roadmap.
Awesome. Do your contacts sync between Outlook and Teams?
So your contacts in Teams are the same contacts in Outlook, right? So this Teams, again, sits on top of the core capabilities of Office 365 and the M365 stack and Azure AD. So all of those contacts and capabilities are really bolted into the whole ecosystem, right? So Teams leverages Exchange for your contacts and your calendar and all of those components, and it uses SharePoint and OneDrive for your files. So yeah, it is sitting on top of all of those elements of Office 365.
Awesome. I know a lot of people have been having fun with backgrounds for these different video conferencing apps. Can you add more backgrounds for your videos? I see that other people have been able to add more than the standard 8 or 10.
So the standard defaults now are out there and everybody has access to it. And then there's now a new feature that just rolled out where you'll see the ability to add your own custom backgrounds into Teams. That rolled out about a week or two ago.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add there is Microsoft's they're doing an agile development methodology with Teams, and they've been very aggressive about rolling out new features every couple of weeks. They rolled out a real-time noise suppression feature that was pretty impressive about a month ago, and I had a webinar that I did for 200 or 300 people. I had a fully operating wood chipper about 80 feet from my door, and nobody could hear it, so it's been pretty impressive.
Awesome. Can Teams be used as a customer support interface for a product line where the end user customers can log in live and ask questions, report a bug, etc.?
Interesting. I don't see why not. That'd be something we'd want to dive a little deeper into. So you can, when you think about Teams as a sort of an application development platform, this might be where you're using the bug recording component as part of some other system or a separate app that's then exposed into Teams. So it depends on how they're looking to achieve that. But I mean, the short answer would be, yeah, I don't see why you couldn't bring it into meetings and calls. We've got APIs through what we call the Graph API. The Graph API is our REST-based API that allows you to, as a developer or an organization that wants to write code to Teams, to basically make calls and access pretty much anything across the board in Office 365. So yeah, that's something we'd have to probably explore a little deeper, but I don't see why you couldn't.
Awesome. Is there a way to delete old conversation threads more than just your own chats? Can you delete a whole thread?
Not today. There are things that are coming, but I have no dates and times available. There's also, again, remember that Teams sits on top of the Office 365 platform. So if you've designed retention policies, data loss prevention, blocked words, things like that you don't want to be happening in conversations and things like that, you can really get granular. But what you're going to do is take advantage of the Security and Compliance Center within Office 365 to define those policies and rules. Again, retention, et cetera, even expirations for Teams. If you've created a team and it sort of has gone idle, maybe you want to clear those out to get rid of the data or the conversations over time. And so you can put expiration policies on them as well. And people will be reminded, hey, your team is going to expire. Do you want to keep it, renew it, or let it go archive or delete?
Awesome. And we'll just add a couple more here because we're coming up on time. Do users utilize the Teams application as a cloud storage area? Can dual factor authentication be utilized to secure the data on Teams?
Yeah, so Teams, again, sits on top of Office 365 and leverages Azure AD for the authentication. So if you've enabled multi-factor authentication within your Office 365 tenant, Teams would honor that and follow that through as well.
Does everyone in a Teams event need to have a purchased copy of Teams?
No, so you can invite guests and they can join into a meeting as an anonymous user or as a user coming from their own tenant, but they do not, the guests or people that you're inviting into the meeting are not required to have a license.
All right, and we'll wrap up with this one. And then again, we have all these questions written down and available to us, so we can follow up with you directly following the session. Can you archive a project after it's complete so it doesn't show up and clog up the teams you're currently working on?
Archive a project. You can archive teams today. So yeah, I mean, that would be one way to do it. So you could almost design a team to be a project and at the end archive the entire team and make it read-only, or obviously purge it if you want. So that's one option. I've seen some folks rename channels and move them to archive, or you can even hide channels that you're no longer using. So there's a couple of ways to achieve that. I mean, it depends on what the goal is for managing that data. That's where you get into some time where you want to kind of think about your design, your governance models, and some of your structure for your team's environment.
Awesome. Then we are good to go on the Q&A portion. Rob Bergman, if you want to wrap it up.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining today. If you want to learn more about our capabilities with Teams and Microsoft 365 and that whole suite, please don't hesitate to reach out to your Cox Biz representative or visit the URL there. And stay tuned for another webinar we'll have on July 22nd that will focus on desktop as a service. And thank you for joining. Appreciate it.